The great one, Reggie. Then, ooh, I think I hear green things growing.
The great one, Reggie. Then I think I hear green things growing. Larry Storch spent 35 years writing in secret when he died in 2022 at age 99. They found 47 unpublished Froop scripts hidden in his apartment. One had his character dying a hero. Another involved time travel. His final script, written 3 months before his death, ended with the words, "Some adventures never end. They just fade to black." But why did he keep writing for a show that betrayed him? The answer involves a fax machine, a bleeding ulcer, and a cancellation that made no sense. This is the story of how Hollywood destroys its own stars, and why Larry never stopped fighting back. Larry Storch was born on January 8, 1923 in a tight little apartment in the Bronx at 1249 Washington Avenue. The walls were soft and you could hear everything. His father, Alfred Storch, used to be a stockbroker. Back in 1928, he was worth $15,000. But when the stock market crashed on October 29, 1929, he only had $47 left. To survive, Alfred drove an old 1925 Chevrolet taxi for 16 hours every day. On a good day, he brought home $3. Larry's mother, Sally, worked 2 jobs. She answered phones from 8 to 4 at New York Telephone Company for $18 a week. At night, she sold costume jewelry door to door, trying to make an extra $5 or $8. They all lived together in that cramped space, including Larry's grandmother, who only spoke Yiddish. She told stories with wild voices and big movements at dinner, turning every meal into a show. That show Larry learned to perform without even realizing it. By the time Larry was 10 in 1933, he was growing up on Forum Road where all kinds of languages filled the streets. More than 47 languages were spoken there every day. Irish gangs like the Forum Baldies clashed with Italians spilling over from East Harlem. Jewish families lived near Bathgate Avenue. Larry would stand outside Gristade's grocery store mimicking old Tony Benedetto, who sold bananas in a heavy Italian accent. His favorite act was pretending to be Benny the Lisp Kowalski, a real-life mobster who handled illegal bets. When Benny saw Larry doing his Lisp act outside Adavern, he chased him 6 blocks with a baseball bat. Larry barely escaped bydiving under a truck. His knees were all scraped up, but he had 37 cents in tips clutched in his fist. That mobster with a list packed would later become one of Larry's most famous routines, and nobody knew it came from a near beating. In 1937, Larry enrolled at Dick Clinton High School. His classmates included people who would later become stars like Don Adams. But by late 1939, things got worse at home. The family was behind on their $23 monthly rent. Unemployment had hit 17.2%. Larry often had only an apple and a slice of dry bread for lunch. While other kids ate real meals, he lied about his age to get a job resetting pins at a bowling alley. He worked from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until midnight, earning 5 cents per game. On Saturdays, he'd make $1.10, more than his dad made all week. With that money, he bought an old copy off McKinney's Jokes and Gags for $15. It taught him how to land a joke with rhythm and timing, but juggling school and work became too much. In February 1940, Larry dropped out. His hands were still stained from the bowling pins when assigned the withdrawal papers. That summer in 1940, he sneaked into the Catskills pretending to be a busboy. At Grossinger's Resort, nobody checked IDs when things got busy. He stood near the stage watching Milton Berle and Sid Caesar perform. One night in July when Berle stepped out for a smoke, Larry grabbed the mic and did a full Humphrey Bogart routine. Even though Casablanca hadn't come out yet, the crowd of 400 roared with laughter, but Jackie Mason, who was waiting to perform next, punched Larry in the eye behind the kitchen for stealing stage time. Despite the black eye, the manager gave Larry free meals for the weekend. That moment taught Larry something real. Comedy wasn't just fun. It was cutthroat. It was serious. In 1941, Larry auditioned for War Radio's The Children's Hour. It paid $25 per spot, which was huge back then. He showed up wearing his only good shirt and used his last subway fare to get there. But as soon as he spoke, the director stopped him. They told him his Bronx accent was too ethnic and laughed him out of the room. One even said he sounded like a guy selling stolen stuff in a street corner. It crushed him. For the next 2 years, he practiced speaking neutral American English in back alleys using a cracked mirror. He copied radio announcers and studied how Jack Benny changed his accent to sound more acceptable. That day scarred him. He never forgot that being himself wasn't good enough for the people who made decisions. On March 15, 1942, Larry got drafted into the Navy. He was 19 and weighed just 145 pounds. They sent him to the Great Lakes Naval Station and then he was assigned to the USS Proteus, a 5-dome 29-feet submarine tender. He worked 18-hour days handling $10,000 torpedoes. On April 16, 1945, during the Battle of Okinawa, a kamikaze plane hit the side of the ship. It killed 12 sailors, including Larry's bunkmate, Tommy Rodriguez. Shrapnel flew past Larry's head and slammed into the wall behind him. He said that near-death moment shaped his timing both in war and comedy. From that day on, he couldn't hear well from his left ear. During those years, he became close with Bernard Schwartz, another sailor from New York, who later changed his name to Tony Curtis. They spent nights in the mesh hall doing impressions and laughing through the chaos. Curtis got sick from the sea and lost 23 pounds in a month. Larry helped him by doing Cary Grant impressions to keep his spirits up. On September 12, 1945, they stood on the deck of the Proteus together and watched Japan surrender through binoculars. Curtis later said Larry taught him the tricks that helped start his movie career. They stayed friends for life. After the war, Larry got discharged on February 12, 1946. But there was a problem. He was almost given a blue discharge, which meant bad conduct because he'd been caught smuggling cigarettes. His commander defended him and after 3 weeks it was changed to honorable. On March 8th, Larry had just $47 in his pocket. Hitchhiked from San Diego to New York in his Navy uniform near Flagstaff, Arizona. The truck he was riding in got hit by a drunk driver. Larry flew into a ditch, slicing his knee on a rock. He needed 12 stitches. For the rest of his career, he wore long pants to hide the scar. Back in Brooklyn on April 23 RD, 1946, he got his first gig as a comic. Feldman's Vaudeville Palace paid him $8 for 15 minutes. He tried doing a Boris Karloff bit, but the crowd didn't laugh, they threw peanuts at him. One dock worker yelled for him to get off the stage. In a panic, Larry slipped on a banana peel left by the last act. The crowd cracked up. An old lady in the front gave him a $2 tip, which he used to buy his first suit from a pawn shop. During his time in Japan after the war, Larry ran a little black market scam. He smuggled 47 cartons of cigarettes off the ship and traded them for swords, silk, and jewelry. He made over $300, which would be about $4,200 today. But on December 15, 1945, a surprise inspection found his stash. He faced serious charges, maybe even 5 years in military prison. But again, his commander stepped in and saved him. Larry served 30 days in the brig and lost 2 months of pay. That incident triggered deep panic attacks and nightmares. He never told people about it, but he later had trouble being in tight spaces and loud storms made him sweat with fear. Then in December 1947, while hitchhiking through Palm Springs, Larry got picked up by band leader Phil Harris. In the car, he did a Clark Gable impression so good that Harris nearly crashed laughing. He took Larry straight to Cairo's nightclub and threw him on stage. Larry killed it with impressions off Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, and even Lucille Ball. She happened to be in the crowd. She loved it so much she hired Larry for $50 a night for her tour. That was the moment his real career began. By March 1948, Larry was headlining at Ciro's, making $125 a night. But one night, he did a Hitler impression in front of Holocaust survivors. The owner banned him for a week, but when Larry came back, the line stretched around the block. That bit that almost ended his career ended up making him a star. In 1949, Larry went on tour with Rags Raglan during a show in Chicago. Raglan collapsed and died mid-performance. Larry didn't know what to do, so he kept going, making jokes about it being method acting. People laughed through tears. The tragedy made Larry's name. Booking shot up. In May 1950, he did a Sinatra impression that made fun of Frank's weight. One mob-connected crooner in the crowd didn't like it. He punched Larry in the face backstage, breaking his nose. But the next night, Larry came out with bandages and made it part of the act. That routine became his biggest draw. In 1951, Larry got a shot on the Kraft Music Hall when Frank Morgan got sick. Larry did such a good impression of Morgan that nobody could tell it wasn't them. CBS got 200 phone calls, but Morgan's family was furious. They said Larry was mocking a dying man. Columnist Walter Winchell even wrote that Larry was dancing on his grave. Larry quit doing the impression after Morgan died, but the controversy had already made him famous. In the summer of 1952, everything changed for Larry Storch. The Dumont Network needed someone fast after Jackie Gleason left Cavalcade of Stars, and they picked Larry. He jumped in on July 5th with wild sketches and even dyed a parody of Glee on himself. It worked. Over 2.1 million viewers watched each week, but behind the scenes, it wasn't going well. Gleason hated being mocked. Whispers in the industry said he paid people to ruin Larry's live shows. On August 19th, things got ugly. Hecklers in the crowd screamed slurs so cruel that Larry broke character in front of everyone. He never talked about it publicly. But years later, he said Gleason called the network himself and told them he'd crush any sponsor who supported that Jewish clown. Even though the ratings were strong, the show disappeared after just 13 weeks. That was Larry's first real shock, and it vanished just like that. But CBS had been watching. They saw the numbers and offered Larry his own show. On February 15, 1953, The Larry Storch Show aired right across from I Love Lucy at 9:00 p.m. That was a setup. Lucy was a juggernaut, pulling in over 67% off viewers, while Larry never cracked 9%. Still, he tried. He brought on stars like Milton Berle, who demanded $10,000 per show. While Larry made $1,500, he paid crew wages from his own pocket. When CBS refused to cover overtime, Larry signed personal guarantees. The show looked great, but was bleeding money. After just 3 months, it was gone. Larry owed $52,000. He sold his Manhattan place and moved back in with his parents in Brooklyn. Years later, CBS execs admitted they put him there to lose, calling him a sacrificial lamb. In 1955, he appeared in the Phil Silvers Show and stole the scene as a fast-talking soldier. Had Yiddish lines that made Silvers crack up on camera, but CBS didn't like it. They told him to stop being too ethnic. One executive told him right on set that Jew boy antics wouldn't work in Middle America. Larry refused to cut his lines. Silvers defended him, even threatening to quit, but CBS cut out 47 seconds from the final version, including a bit about Larry's character's mother's cooking. The moment was gone, but the label stuck. From then on, casting directors would add notes, tone down the Jewish stuff. It followed him everywhere. When he hit Broadway in 1958, things looked up again. He starred in Who Was That Lady I Saw You With alongside Dean Martin and Joanne Woodward. Larry nailed the physical comedy, even tripping over the same ottoman for 237 shows. The crowd loved it. There was even talk of a Tony nomination, but offstage he partied hard. On March 15, he showed up drunk, missed his cue, and made jokes about Dean Martin's drinking. He once brought a chorus girl into his dressing room and held up the show for 23 minutes. The producer wanted to fire him, but when Larry was in the show, they made $47,000 a week. When he was out sick, it dropped to $31,000, so he stayed. The play ran for 208 performances, but after that, nobody on Broadway trusted him again. In 1959, things got even worse. Larry filmed epilogue called The Double Agent, where Hep played a goofy CIA spy. In one scene, he joked that his character was under suspicion for reading books and thinking. NBC didn't like that. The McCarthy era